Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 2014 to 2015 series Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man. Galactus. He's the big scary dude in the purple outfit who literally eats planets. A giant figure of him can be built from pieces that come with other action figures. Or you can play as a giant zombie figure of him in the upcoming Marvel Zombies game. That isn't a sponsored ad, I just really like Zombicide. He's so powerful, Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four had to use the ultimate nullifier that would literally destroy the entire universe in order to scare the big purple man away from eating the Earth. Galactus would continue appearing in stories around the Marvel Universe after that, even proving to be an important character in major events like Infinity Gauntlet. So it's probably not that surprising that the first major crossover event set in the then still young Ultimate Universe was centered around the appearance of the Ultimate version of Galactus. Due to delays, the build-up to the coming of Galactus ended up lasting a couple years, only for it to be revealed that Warren Ellis apparently didn't think a giant purple man was cool, and so he changed Galactus to be a swarm of insectoid robots. Okay. Not sure why a swarm of robots would be better, or why it would have the hunger to devour planets, or if we gave it that they did, why they wouldn't just eat every planet they came across and instead skip literally every other planet and planet-like object in our solar system to come straight for Earth. But hey, I'm not reviewing that series right now, so I guess we'll leave it. Anyway, the world moved on from that, the Ultimate Galactus trilogy was probably mostly forgotten about, and Miles Morales came into existence. Cause again, this is a review of a Miles comic, as you've probably forgotten by this point. I covered the first Ultimate Spider-Man comic focused on Miles in one of my first videos on this channel, and immediately after that comic ended, Ultimate Cataclysm began, which saw the normal universe Galactus come to the Ultimate Earth to devour it, proving that the big guy could still be frightening in this situation. And yeah, since I've already covered several Miles comics, I did choose to use this intro to whine about how much I hated Ellis's version of Galactus. What of it? But also to say that during the 3-issue Ultimate Spider-Man miniseries that came between the first Ultimate Spider-Man series and this one, Miles, believing the world was about to end, revealed his secret identity to his dad, Jefferson Davis. His dad did not take it well, which is putting it mildly, as Jeff yelled at Miles, blaming him for the deaths of both his wife, Miles' mom Rio, and his brother, Miles' uncle, Aaron, before just vanishing altogether. With Miles' help, the Ultimates managed to defeat regular Galactus, but the Ultimates essentially all died to save the world, leaving Miles to form a new Ultimate group with the team-up of superheroes he had made at the end of the previous series. And that leads us into the current series, so it's time for me to stop complaining about stupid insect robot Galactuses, so we can take this away. The comic opens on issue 200 of Ultimate Spider-Man. Very cool. Except I'm still not sure how it's issue 200. The last issue of the regular Ultimate Spider-Man comic was issue 160. And then there were 28 issues of the previous Miles series, or maybe 29 I guess because of that weird issue 16.1. But that would still only put this at 189. There are then various specials and annuals and other comics that could maybe be added on as well, but no matter how I add them together, I don't seem to get to 199 exactly to allow for this being issue 200. So this may have been issue 200 because they wanted to kick off this series with a special issue and not because it is in fact issue 200, but if someone can explain this to me, feel free to. Anyway, the issue is about a meetup being held at Aunt May's house in memory of Peter, who died 2 years earlier on this day, as they say here. Miles and his best pal Genki are among those invited, and Genki's bringing a present for Gwen that they spend a remarkable amount of page, panel, and dialogue time talking about, and showing us that Gwen is apparently very appreciative of the thought. only to end up not even showing us what the present is. Because heaven forbid we make some kind of effort to give insight to a character's actual personality. Much better to leave every possible aspect a complete mystery so readers can write whatever personality they want onto a character, even if we're wasting a massive amount of time on something that ends up getting no payoff. Who wants three-dimensional characters anyway? This is a comic book, so, everything's 2 dimensions. The memorial is mostly done in some splash page spreads that seem to be one of Bendis' favorite storytelling tricks because I've seen him do it a ton. Just in comics that I've covered, we see it here, we saw it in Avengers Disassembled, and we saw it in Naomi. Sometimes it's other artists doing the spread, like here, and sometimes it's not, like in Naomi. But it still seems like its primary goal is to save some work for both the main artist and the writer, but I just personally find it kind of annoying. Get some new tricks, Bendis. Also, Miles talks completely openly about being Spider-Man now, so I guess everyone gathered here already knew that Miles was the new Spider-Man? I get that all these people are some of Peter's amazing friends and generally good people, but, still seems a little reckless? But okay. At the end of the memorial, as everyone's leaving, we see a mysterious figure watching them from the bushes. Is this character going to be important? I don't know. If we can't learn what was in the box, then why should we learn who this character is, right? So the real story begins on Spider-Man. Oh, Spider-Men? No, I covered that story. But these 2 spider guys are criminal imitators in some kind of mech suit that make them stronger, faster, and more durable, and they go about making high-tech heists around the city. Especially at former S.H.I.E.L.D. locations, since following the death of the Ultimates and the coming of Galactus, S.H.I.E.L.D. is apparently no longer a thing. Which is bad news in other ways because it was S.H.I.E.L.D. that was keeping Norman Osborn under wraps. Osborn was the guy who created the formula that empowered the spiders that bit both Peter Parker and Miles Morales, giving them spider powers. And he also turned himself into a giant green goblin Hulk man. He's also the one that killed Peter Parker and supposedly also died in that fight, but apparently didn't. And now that S.H.I.E.L.D's no longer a thing, he's being transferred out of his super secure cage and put on a much less secure transport, where he, of course, escapes. 'Cause duh. Miles, in the meantime, is regularly swinging by his home to see if his father has returned, but instead of finding his dad there, he finds Peter freaking Parker! What you doing here, Pete? Pete doesn't say much other than that he just wants his web shooters back, but Miles is too busy being understandably freaked out, so Peter simply knocks him out and takes them. When Miles comes to, Peter's gone, and so are the web shooters. But there's not much time to dwell on this, because Miles quickly learns that Osborn is alive and on the run, and so he heads to Aunt May's house in case the madman shows up there. Which, of course, he does. Miles tries to fight him without much success because Gobbygobs here pretty much just sets everything around him on fire. But just when it seems like Miles is going to lose the fight, Peter steps into the light. And since the fight is being broadcast, this means that everyone in Peter's life pretty much now knows that he is alive, like Aunt May and Gwen Stacy. The double dose of Spider-Man proves too much for Normie, especially after Miles unleashes his OP Venom Blast, and so Ozzy simply runs away from the fight, and heads straight to J. Jonah Jameson's schmancy penthouse apartment. I mean, check out this shit. That's some nice shit. Who gets to live like that? Rich people. I swear. Where was I? Osborn turns back into his human self and tells Jonah that he just wants to give the newspaper man his story, so Jonah rather casually obliges him. Osborn says the Venom Blast seems to have cleared his head and that his superpower formula seems to have made it so that he can't die. But it turns out Jameson didn't really want to hear anything and he just shoots Osborn straight in the face. Only he was literally just saying that he can't die now. So he just gets right back up and continues explaining that he meant what he said, that whatever was in the formula that gave him and Parker powers, it also seems to have made them immortal. And then he straight up kills J. Jonah Jameson right then and there. Wow, that's kind of messed up. That's a very sudden end to a very major character, but okay. Peter and Miles, meanwhile, were forced to run from the cops, which is easier for Peter since, he still has the web shooters. Miles gets shot and ducks into an alleyway only to get rescued by Maria Hill. Hill, like her regular universe counterpart, was once in S.H.I.E.L.D., but in this universe, at some point she jumped ship before it got shut down and instead became a cop. And not just any cop, the detective assigned to the criminal Spider Twins case. And that meant she was working with these two dopey weirdos who, by the way, are clearly self-inserts of writer Brian Michael Bendis and artist David Marquez, both of whom returned to this title from working on much of the previous series together, along with colorist Justin Ponseur, though I noticed he doesn't seem to get a cop equivalent. He also apparently passed away recently from cancer, which is a serious bummer. His colors were really a large part of what made both of these series great, so rest in peace, man. Anyway, I do love how during this sequence, there's this man dressed in Ms. Marvel's old outfit warning that the Earths are converging, which is supposed to just be crazy talk, but it's also exactly what is about to happen in the upcoming Secret Wars crossover. These two also appear one more time in the comic in the very last issue of the series, looking like they're congratulating each other on a job well done, which, fair enough. Anyway, Maria helps Miles get healed up from his bullet wound and takes him to see Peter, who is hiding in the most obvious place that he could hide, Mary Jane's house. So Pete finally tells his story, which is pretty much that he woke up in a warehouse and ran straight to Mary Jane. When he saw her reaction to him still being alive, he decided he couldn't put anybody else through that. So, instead of telling people like Aunt May and Gwen, he continued letting them believe he was dead. They did try to confirm that he wasn't a clone or something like that by digging up his casket and they found it empty, but we don't really learn anything beyond that. Aunt May and Gwen, though, also figured out the obvious that Peter would be hiding with MJ, and so they show up now too, so we can have a big happy reunion. But that means old Normie also figured out the obvious, and so he shows up, launching us into pretty much a repeat of the previous fight. This time, Pete and Miles keep beating Osborn down, but he keeps getting back up again. You're never gonna keep him down. And I don't know how all these explosions and fireballs don't hurt the others that are there, like Maria, who is literally standing like 5 feet from him for most of the fight, or anyone inside. It's also pretty convenient how Miles never burns himself again like he did in the previous fight. It's almost like we're running out of issues, so we just, don't have time for the heroes to be bad at fighting. Osborn does claim at one point during the fight to know the secret behind Miles' dad, as he's also somehow managed to figure out that Miles is the new Spider-Man. But before anything can really be resolved one way or another, Osborn just suddenly kills over dead in the middle of the fight. For good measure, Maria shoots him a few times and lights his body on fire, and I guess for whatever reason we're actually supposed to buy it that this time he's really dead. That may be called into question though, seeing as we see him as part of the revived Ultimate Universe that appears in Spider-Man 2 as I covered last year. With Osborn finished, Pete and the gang run off to say their goodbyes, as Pete says he needs to look for answers, so he leaves Miles the web shooters and together with Mary Jane he rides off into the sunset, never to be seen again. Miles returns to his dorm at Vision's Academy only to be woken up early the next morning by Ganke, as it seems Jefferson Davis has finally decided to return home. So from here we launch into a flashback, as we finally learn the past history of Jeff and his bro Aaron, as had been hinted at somewhat in the beginning of the first series. It seems Aaron was doing work for some small-time gangster named Turk, who owned a club named Club 2099, a reference of course to Marvel 2099. Even in the silly neon font style on the club door, which is flippin' awesome. So Aaron apparently made some deal that sold out Jefferson as a fall guy, but when Turk's men go to kill Jeffrey, he suddenly turns around and kicks their asses and escapes. The police show up for some reason and arrest Jeff, but his bail ends up being posted by Samuel L. Jackson. Oh wait, no, that's Nick Fury, right? Forgot about that again. So Fury tells Jeffrey that S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to recruit him since Turk is going to turn around and try to hire Jefferson now, impressed by his ability to kick his enforcers' asses. S.H.I.E.L.D. then wants Jefferson to help make Turk into a bigger crime lord until he gets the attention of one Wilson Fisk. Fisk will then take over Turk's operations, and that includes inducting Jefferson into his criminal empire. Then, with Jeff's help again, he would continue growing into a kingpin of crime until eventually he tries his hand at some really deep, dark shit. And that shit is to try and buy the source for some drug that temporarily gives people mutant abilities. Another Bendis staple, as we saw it in Powers, we'll see it after this in Spider-Man 2, and here it is again. Toad, who is the seller here, reveals that the source is a mutant, and Jefferson, for I would assume obvious reasons, is absolutely not cool with the buying and selling of a living being. But that's okay, because this is the point S.H.I.E.L.D. finally steps in and arrests Fisk, Toad, and all kinds of people involved in this racket. S.H.I.E.L.D. offers Jefferson a full-time job, but he's done with this life and tries to move on so he can go about becoming a better person, which starts with him meeting and marrying Miles' mom, and then with Miles being born. But he continued to have hang-ups about those in power and those with power, and being messed up by the death of his brother and his wife, he lashed out at Miles and ran away, but eventually realized he wasn't angry at Miles, he was angry at himself, and that he needed to return to his son. Also, this is a little bit unrelated, but I feel like this story may have been sort of the prototype origin of the backstory of the regular universe Miles Morales from Spider-Man 2, seeing as there is a deep similarity between the stories. I don't know. You tell me. So with his dad back, Miles moves on to deal with the last lingering problem in his life, his girlfriend, Katie Bishop. Earlier in the series, because he decided he was sick of lying to her, he decided to tell her he was Spider-Man, and she responded by running away crying and then proceeding to avoid him completely. Thinking she was just overwhelmed by this revelation, because that's a totally normal reaction for someone overwhelmed by that kind of revelation, he shows up to her house to talk to her, only to get drugged by her father and wake up in a Hydra base. Yeah, turns out Katie and her whole family are actually part of Hydra. She was born into it, and it's the only world she's ever known, but that doesn't stop Miles from holding her supervillain force programming against her. I really feel like Katie is the victim here, but I guess we don't have time for that level of complexity because we're on the last two issues, so mostly there's just a lot of Miles being angry at her. He attempts to escape, since regular ropes were obviously not going to hold someone with the proportional strength of a spider, only to discover that they've also captured his father and Genki, and that Hydra has apparently decided to partner up with Dr. freaking Doom. Yeah, he has goat legs. Ultimate Fantastic Four was a mess. Apparently Warren Ellis' reasoning is giant purple guy? Dumb. But goat-legged Dr. Doom? Totally awesome. So they put Miles in some kind of containment field, along with the Ultimate Universe version of Spider-Woman Jessica Drew, who here is a gender-bent clone of Ultimate Peter Parker, as Miles explained to Genki earlier for those who hadn't been following along with the universe. Oh Genki, if only more dudes were like you. Jessica had attempted to stop the Spider-Twins on her own, but they had proven to be too much for her, and as it also turns out, they worked for Doom. So when they defeated her, they also brought her to this same abandoned warehouse that is the secret Hydra base. But Miles, freaking out as they use lasers to try and gather tissue samples from him, suddenly develops a brand new superpower, the Mega Venom Blast. The Mega Venom Blast, for those who find their already OP Venom Blast just not OP enough, now with even more destruction. Yay! Then, since we're running out of page count, and obviously we couldn't have cut anything out earlier in the comic, we just skip past how Miles actually manages to defeat Dr. freaking Doom and all of his Doombots and the Spider-Twins and who knows how many Hydra soldiers, and jump straight to Miles knocking Doom out, right as the current version of the Ultimates shows up. In Judge was the roommate that Miles and Genki were super rude to in the previous series, but he apparently figured out on his own that Miles had to be Spider-Man and was the only one to notice the weird connection between Genki, Miles, and Katie all being out of school at the same time. While investigating, he runs across Cloak and Dagger, and they decide to work together to search for Miles. And with some further help from Maria Hill, that eventually leads them all to the warehouse. Although they apparently arrived too late to actually do anything, they still wouldn't be here at all if it wasn't for Judge, so, you know, I told you should have been nicer to Judge, Miles, but you didn't listen. I guess it kind of worked out anyway. Whatever. There's some more yelling at Katie, even though she's basically offering to help here, and again, I really feel like she's the victim of some serious supervillain indoctrination, familial abuse type stuff, but also, again, I guess we don't have time to get into anything that complex because, holy shit, the world is ending. Yeah, remember when I said that thing about multiverses combining during the upcoming Secret Wars event? That's what is starting to happen right here, and so that means this comic ends so that that one can begin, and so that we can get to the breakdown. For the most part, I feel like the complaints I have for this series are pretty much the same exact complaints I have for basically every other Bendis series I've covered so far, and you can probably watch those videos if you want to hear my criticisms. But I will say that part of why it's fun to criticize Bendis is because his comics are actually good, and this is a perfect example. Everything that's fun and entertaining about Miles and his story is fully on display here. And yeah, some of the plot feels super rushed, while too much of the non-plot feels way too not rushed, and there's the same old all characters having mostly the same dialogue mannerisms, and that annoying deliberate refusal to dive into any character's actual likes or interests to truly develop their personalities. But overall, I still feel the creative team delivered a strong product. So yeah, I'm giving this series a recommendation level of high. Like with the first series, if you're at all interested in the character, it's a good, strong comic with plenty to like, and you definitely shouldn't skip it. The collected editions get 2 unexplained gift boxes, which is definitely more on the bad side, but not too much. Because who knows, it could be something good in there. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Except in this case, I know, and it's that both volumes are just 6 issues with basically no bonuses whatsoever, so you're paying only really to have the comics. Which is fine, I guess, but still disappointing. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm just taking a very short break from Green Lantern here before I get back to covering the remaining series and the big crossover stories. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, or just can't wait for me to get back to the New 52, then make sure to click that like and subscribe button so you can be sure to be around for next time, and I hope to see you then, right here in the Comic Cave.